On the morning of September the 20th, 1869, outside the French village of Pantin, on the northeastern outskirts of Paris, farmer Jean Langlois saw unusual disturbances to the planting in a neighbouring field of alfalfa and went to investigate. The track stopped at a small earth mound. Curious, the farmer dug into the middle of the pile with a spade and spotted a handkerchief that was stained with what appeared to be fresh blood, and then a child's arm. Continuing to dig with his hands, he unearthed a blood-stained child's face staring back at him. Shocked, he hurried to alert the authorities, who sent a police officer and a medical examiner. In the hours that followed, a systematic search led to the digging up of body after body, including a 2-year-old girl, 4 young boys, and their pregnant mother. They were later identified by their clothes and documents found on them. It was clear that they had all been stabbed with a knife and also had signs of strangulation. A blood-covered shovel and ropes were also found buried nearby. The victims were quickly identified as the Kinck family: Alfred, Henri, Marie, Achille, and Emile, and their mother, Hortense. Some days earlier, they had arrived at Pantin by train via Paris from Roubaix, which is located near Lille in northwestern France, and had reserved 2 rooms in a hotel in the town. These were their last known movements before they disappeared. According to the inquiry led in Roubaix, it appears that Jean Kinck, born in 1826, had married his wife in 1852, and they had 6 children. The family was well off, and their position was enviable. From a simple mechanic, he had managed to start his own business in Roubaix and owned 3 houses and an estate in Boule, where he was planning to retire. On August the 25th, he had gone to Alsace on business, followed a few days later by his eldest son, Gustave. Having no news of them since then, the police started to suspect that the 2 men were responsible for the crimes, as their whereabouts were unknown. The shocking discovery had understandably immediately caused a stir, and the case was to be extensively reported in the newspapers, not only across France, but also in England. The day after the crime came to light, on September the 21st, the police spoke to a coachman who had driven the presumed murderer and the Kinck family from the Gare du Nord in Paris to Pantin. The police now had the suspect's description, and the search for who had done this most despicable atrocity was underway. As the coachman described the man as young and slim, the suspicion focused on the eldest son, Gustave Kinck. Nobody knew then that Gustave had in fact been killed 2 days previously and buried in the same field. As for his father, there was no trace. Crowds of Parisians flocked to see the field where Madame Kinck and her children had been slaughtered and buried. So many came to view the crime scene and trampled all over it that it couldn't be used for planting crops for 2 years afterwards. Completely by chance or happy accident, the potential suspect came to light. September the 22nd, 1869, in the French port city of Le Havre, completely by chance, a young man is arrested for lack of identity papers after a routine stop by a police officer. When the officer, called Ferrand, quite by coincidence, mentions the tragedy in Pantin, the arrested man tries to escape by jumping into the harbour. He is saved from drowning in the water and searched. On him were found the ID papers of Jean Kinck, which immediately linked him to the murders. The next day, he gives his true identity as Jean-Baptiste Troppmann, born on October the 5th, 1849, in the Alsace town of Cerny. He left school at 14 to work for his father's firm, Troppmann and Cambly, installing his father's patented spindles for cotton spinning machines. He was of above average intelligence, and his fascination with true crime was overshadowed only by his fixation with money. Despite his slight build, he was agile and strong, and one of his first explorations of violence was when he attacked his brother Edmund with a hammer, injuring him badly. His father, Joseph Troppmann, was an ingenious and prolific inventor and held several patents relating to the improvement of various spinning machines and accessories. The boy's future seemed mapped out to promote these articles throughout France and perhaps beyond. The father liked to drink copious amounts of wine and spent lavishly, compromising his business future. No doubt the situation weighed on the mind of his son. He understood that his father's affairs would never be up to his ambitions. When he spoke, it was all about money, the riches he would one day enjoy. People who knew him noted that he was an avid reader of sensational and macabre news items relating to criminal acts. So what was the connection between Troppmann and a murdered family? Towards the end of 1868, he had been tasked to go to Roubaix to install machine parts sold by his father to a Parisian businessman called Jean Kinck. He found accommodation in Pantin and was there until May the following year. A short time later, he travelled for a second installation, which allowed him to meet the Kinck family. Jean Kinck happened to be Troppmann's compatriot, also originally from the Alsace region. He was pragmatic and had seriousness and skill as he had progressed from worker to foreman and then to the boss of a prosperous spinning firm. The family was well off and was envied. Both, as it happened, were dissatisfied men in their own separate ways. Kinck dreamed of amassing a large fortune before retiring to his native province of Alsace. Troppmann, for his part, was eager to succeed and could not find it fast enough. In 1869, during a second installation visit, the two men agreed on two objectives. Troppmann would seek an Alsatian property for Kinck's retirement and would obtain an agreement with his father so that Kinck could exploit his patents abroad. They both had another goal in mind, which was to make some easy money. Somewhere during conversations between the two men, a plan that was mutually acceptable to them both seems to have evolved. And was it then that Troppmann saw Kinck as a potential victim when the young man mentioned his business proposition? The tempting idea was to make more money even if it involved criminal activity. When Troppmann explained his scheme, Kinck was taken in with the idea of setting up a counterfeiting operation, and he knew the perfect place to do it, which was the basement of a ruined country house in a remote location where the police were unlikely to come knocking. But Troppmann had a different get-rich scheme in mind. The two travelled to Alsace on August the 25th to look at a potential building for their proposed money-printing plant. Kinck was lost in thought as Troppmann showed him around the basement, musing over how his already healthy bank balance could grow even more if their counterfeiting plan was successful, as he was ready to increase his wealth. He congratulated Troppmann for finding the perfect place to house their illegal outfit, and what better way to celebrate but a glass of wine. Troppmann poured 2 glasses, but when out of view, added some cyanide to one of the glasses and offered it to his new friend. Kinck took a sip and he collapsed to the floor, gasping for life. He was dead within moments and buried where he fell. Troppmann took money and valuables on the corpse and then left it in the basement, having never had any intention of going into business with him in the first place. His outrageous deception wasn't over, as he wrote a letter to Kinck's wife, supposedly written by her husband, asking her to telegraph some money. Several attempts to cash the amount that had been sent met with failure, as the employee at the local post office was suspicious of the transaction. Hortense Kinck was a trusting woman and saw no reason to question a second message, so she sent her 16-year-old son Gustav to the address provided in the letter with an envelope full of money. Troppmann then sent another message requesting cash on the 19th of September, mentioning that he was writing on behalf of her husband, as he was very busy working, and to meet in Pantin. Hortense was a trusting woman and saw no reason to question the message. This time, apparently having wondered where Gustav had got to, accompanied her 5 other children, arrived with the money, some 55,000 francs. Subsequently to this, they were all murdered and buried in a shallow grave, measuring 3 meters long and 75 centimeters deep. On September the 26th, there was a new event concerning the case. 30 meters away from the location where the bodies had been found, the buried corpse of Gustav Kinck was discovered, having died from stab wounds. Having callously wiped out all 8 members of the Kinck family, Troppmann packed his bags and went on the run, staying at a number of different hotels using an alias. He was heading for the port of Le Havre, where he planned to board a ship to America. Meanwhile, the inquiry goes on during October, notably in Alsace, in order to find Jean Kinck. When Troppmann was captured on the 22nd of September and his belongings searched after making his break for freedom at Le Havre, the officers found he was carrying ID papers on his person belonging to Jean Kinck, as well as a considerable amount of cash, linking him to the sickening mass murder. Justice awaited. Once returned to Paris on the 12th of November, he made a full confession, and the police were able to find and recover in Alsace the body of Jean Kinck that was buried in the cellar of an empty house. He confirms that he travelled on August the 25th with the now deceased Jean to show him a potential workshop to print forged money hidden in the basement of the empty house, which was located in a remote rural area. He related that he had in his pocket a bottle of prussic acid, better known as cyanide, using a moment that Jean Kinck was not in sight, emptying the contents of the bottle into a glass of wine. He invited him to drink, and he immediately dropped dead. Troppmann continued to relate that as he returned to Paris, how Gustav joined him on September the 17th after the failed bank transfer. He said, "I met Gustav at the hotel where he wrote to his mother to tell her to come and meet him with the children. I then told him I was going to take him to his father. When we were in an isolated place in the middle of the field, I stabbed him in the back. Whether I stabbed him again, I don't remember. I put Gustav into a grave after having robbed him. The mother arrives on the evening of September the 19th. I meet her at the station and tell her that I'm going to lead her to her husband. I killed Jean Kinck to grab the money he said he had in his bank. It was a necessity for me to kill the other members of the family, so to suppress all the witnesses. On December the 9th, Troppmann is transferred from the police cells to the prison at La Conciergerie, incidentally where Marie Antoinette was jailed. The 3-day trial began on 27th of December 1869. He was convicted of mass murder and sentenced to death and an appointment with Madame Guillotine. He had killed for profit, and being in his early 20s, he was possibly starting on what could have been a long career of murder. While awaiting his fate, Troppmann told his fellow inmates that he would rather commit suicide than be executed, but he did not get the chance. On the 19th of January 1870, before a large crowd, 22-year-old Jean-Baptiste Troppmann was led to the guillotine in La Place de la Roquette outside of the prison, where, with the pull of a rope and the flash of a blade, his head was separated from his body with the same ease and efficiency with which he had taken the lives of the Kinck family. The body of the murderer, one of the most atrocious criminals of the 19th century, was buried in the cemetery of Ivry. The murders, trial, and execution were extensively reported in the French press, and with the notoriety of the case, bought the best-selling newspaper in France at the time, Le Petit Journal, more than doubled its daily circulation, selling 594,000 copies the day of the execution.